The snow fell gently over the quiet town, shrouding it in an eerie stillness. People went about their business, but something odd was happening. 3 strangers were arriving, one after another. William, with his charming smile and confident gait, said he came to visit an old friend. Jacobs, with hunched shoulders and darting eyes, muttered something about a family matter. Stevart, too well dressed for a place like this, said he was just passing through. But something about them seemed off. They came from different directions, yet somehow felt strangely connected to one another. Each of the men shot a glimpse at the other as though they had finally seen the other again or someone he knew. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, "Why here? Why now?" And with their stories begun to twist and tangle as they moved through the snow-covered streets. Why did they all arrive on the same day? And what are they hiding? Word spread quickly in the small, snow-covered town. 3 strangers arriving on the same day was unusual enough, but their behavior only added to the mystery. William greeted everyone with an exaggerated warmth, shaking hands and asking questions as if he wanted to be liked by all. Jacobs, in contrast, shrunk away, avoiding eye contact and muttering short replies to questions put to him when approached. Stevart was the strangest of all, his sharp gaze scanning every face, like he was searching for somebody or something. The townsfolk whispered behind closed doors and over steaming mugs of tea. "Do they know each other?" someone asked. "They're too different," another replied, shaking their head. But the glances exchanged between the 3 men told a different story. Are they connected, or is this just a strange coincidence? A child, wrapped in thick clothing against the cold, played near the old church. Digging through the snow, he found a piece of paper, a torn map with some strange symbols drawn in faded ink. He ran to show it to the adults, who scratched their heads in confusion. "Looks ancient," said one man. "But where does it lead?" When the 3 strangers heard of the map, their reactions were immediate and intense. William's usual cheer disappeared as he rushed to get a closer look. Jacobs, who had avoided people all day, suddenly pushed his way through the crowd, his hands trembling as he reached for the map. Stevart stood back at first, then stepped forward slowly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the markings. The townsfolk could sense how desperate they seemed. Why should these strangers care about some old piece of paper so much? And what can these symbols possibly mean? Why are they so desperate to see it? The snow in the town square sparkled in the fading afternoon sun as the 3 strangers crossed paths for the first time. William stood near the bakery, chatting easily with a vendor, while Jacobs lingered by the fountain, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets. Stevart appeared next, strolling casually but with eyes that missed nothing. Their encounter was accidental, but the tension of the air was undeniable. William smiled warmly at others, but his smile missed the eyes. Jacobs, meanwhile, looked between the 2, his face sallow and agitated. He wished he were a long way from there, far from that place and time. Stevart stepped back, considering them both. "So what brings you 2 to this fine little town?" William inquired with a chuckle. "Just passing through," Jacobs muttered, looking away. "Same," Stevart said, but his sharp gaze lingered too long on William's pocket. The townsfolk who witnessed the scene whispered among themselves. Were these 3 truly strangers? Their stolen glances and stiff responses said otherwise. The way they positioned themselves, like pieces on a chessboard, hinted at a hidden game, one no one else could see. Do they have a shared past, or is this just a game? The next day, the 3 strangers sat in a dimly lit corner of the inn, drawn together by the murmurs of an old man seated near the fireplace. The old man had been rambling about a treasure, hidden long ago by someone who didn't trust the world to find it. "A key," he said in a low, gravelly voice. "Without it, the treasure's worthless. But it's out there. Somewhere." William leaned in closer, his jolly face veering into something more intense. "A key, you say? What does it look like?" The old man smiled, his twinkling eyes gleaming at mischief. Not some ordinary key. This has been passed down through families. Only those destined to find the treasure will know when they see this. Jacobs shifted uncomfortably, his foot tapping on the floor. He seemed to want to get out of there but couldn't. Stevart's face darkened, and his jaw clenched like the man's words awakened memories he would rather forget. The old man's story spread like wildfire, and the townspeople began to wonder. But nobody noticed how the mention of the key made William and Jacobs visibly nervous. Did one of them already have it? If so, why hadn't they said something? Stevart said nothing, his face unreadable. Who has the key, and what will they do with it? The fire in the inn crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the dimly lit room. Stevart sat at a corner table, his mind replaying the old man's tale about the key and the treasure. He leaned back, his coat draped over the chair, oblivious to the folded paper tucked into its folds. It wasn't until he reached for his coat to leave that the note slipped out and landed on the wooden floor. Frowning, he picked it up. The paper was worn, the edges crinkled as if handled too many times. The words, scrawled hastily in dark ink, made his heart race. Stay away from the treasure. This isn't your game to win. There will be consequences. Stevart scanned the room, but no one seemed out of place. William was at the bar laughing with the innkeeper, while Jacob sat in a dark corner staring into his drink. The rest of the patrons looked like harmless townsfolk, yet someone had left the note, and they knew about the treasure hunt. Why Stevart? Why pick on him? Stevart folded the paper and put it in his pocket, his mind spinning with possibilities. Was somebody trying to scare him away? Or was it just a warning from someone who knew what lay ahead? He couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched, as if every step he made was part of a larger game played out of his awareness. Who wrote the note, and why did it target Stevart specifically? The next morning, the snow-covered streets were abuzz with whispers. William, Jacobs, and Stevart stood at the edge of town, the torn map clutched in William's hand. The legend of the treasure had consumed them, and none of them could resist its pull. "This way," William said confidently, pointing to a faint trail that led into the woods. "No," Jacobs cut in, his voice sharper than normal. "The map clearly indicates the riverbank. That is where we should begin." "And how would you know?" Stevart shot back, his voice as cold as ice. Argument crackled between them as they debated the clues from the map. Curious and emboldened by the drama unfolding, the townsfolk followed at a safe distance. Children peeked out from behind trees while adults whispered theories about what the strangers were searching for. The three walked through the snow, their breaths visible in the cold air. The further they went, the more the arguments escalated. William accused Jacobs of deliberately misleading them. Jacobs fired back, suggesting that William was hiding something. Stevart kept his suspicions to himself, watching the others with calculating eyes. As the day dragged on, it was apparent. They were not a team. Greed, mistrust, and ambition poisoned every step they took. The journey ahead would test not only their wits, but also their ability to work together. Will they work together, or will greed take over? It had begun to get dark, and they had camped along a frozen stream. Shadows danced across the ground, long and sinister in the flickering fire. They ate in silence. William was the first to fall asleep, his hat pulled low over his eyes. Stevart lay beside him, one hand resting protectively over his pack. Jacobs, though, couldn't sleep. He kept glancing at the map, the torn edges calling to him like a siren's song. Hours later, when the fire had burned low, Jacobs crept out of his bedroll. He moved quietly, clutching the map as he stepped away from the camp. His eyes darted nervously as he scanned the symbols by the moonlight, tracing routes with his finger. "What are you doing?" The voice startled him, and he spun around to see William standing there, arms crossed. Stevart wasn't far behind, his face unreadable but his presence imposing. "I wasn't," Jacobs stammered, his voice shaking. "I was just trying to make sense of the map. For us." "Is that so?" William said, stepping closer. Or were you planning to find the treasure on your own? Accusations were hurled about, and for a moment, fists were going to fly. Jacobs insisted he wasn't trying to betray them, but the trust between the three was already fragile. Betrayal, real or imagined, created a crack that would only deepen further with the journey. Can the group trust one another, or will it all fall apart? The sun slowly rose and cast pale light over the rocky hills. The three men reached the mouth of a cave, whose entrance was dark and foreboding. According to the map, this was the place. The treasure lay somewhere inside. The air turned cool as they entered the cave. Shadows danced on the walls, and the faint echo of dripping water echoed. Stavert stopped, turning around to face everyone. "There is something that I must tell you all," he said in a steady, low voice. William raised an eyebrow. "Now's not the time for secrets, Stavert." "No, it is," Stavert maintained. "The treasure isn't gold or jewels. It's something different, something far more valuable." Jacob sneered, his face a mess of disbelief and frustration. "What are you talking about? What could possibly be more valuable than gold?" Stavert didn't answer him at first. Instead, he seemed to gaze deeper into the cave, his face shaded by a mix of fear and determination. "You'll see soon enough," he said cryptically. The revelation hung heavy in the air. If the treasure wasn't material wealth, then what was it? And why did Stavert know more than he had let on? What could be more precious than gold?